When I received what seemed like a normal Amazon delivery, I never expected it would expose years of corruption in our neighborhood and bring down the HOA president who called the cops on me. What dark secrets was Barbara really trying to hide when she dialed 911 over my suspicious package? Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. I was in the middle of a work video call when I heard heavy knocking at my front door. Through my security camera, I saw two police officers standing there with serious looks on their faces. My heart started racing. What could they possibly want with me? Little did I know this moment would change everything in our neighborhood. Just 30 minutes earlier, I'd been excited to see the Amazon delivery van pull up. My son's birthday was coming up, and I'd ordered him that robotics kit he'd been begging for. The delivery person rang the doorbell, left the package, and drove away. Totally normal, right? Wrong. At least according to Barbara Thompson, my next-door neighbor and the president of our homeowners association. I noticed her twitching curtains as I brought the package inside, but I didn't think much of it. Barbara was always watching everyone's moves in our neighborhood like a hawk, especially since I'd moved in 6 months ago. The police officers explained that someone had called 911 about a suspicious package delivery to a potential security threat. I couldn't help but laugh. I'm a software engineer who works from home and volunteers at the local animal shelter on weekends. The most threatening thing about me is probably my collection of Star Wars t-shirts. "Ma'am, we take these calls very seriously," the taller officer said, but I could see a hint of doubt in his eyes as he looked at my welcome mat with cartoon cats on it. I invited them in and showed them the Amazon package, complete with tracking information on my phone. That's when we all heard the distinct sound of a camera clicking outside my living room window. The officers turned just in time to see Barbara ducking behind my hydrangea bushes, her floral moo-moo making her look like a walking garden trying to hide in my actual garden. "Is that your neighbor?" the shorter officer asked, raising his eyebrows. I nodded, pulling up my phone's security footage of Barbara, making this her 4th inspection of my property this week. But here's where it gets interesting. While looking through my security footage to show the officers Barbara's regular patrols, I noticed something in the background of an older clip. Barbara wasn't just snooping around my house. She was actually measuring my windows with a ruler. When I zoomed in, I could see her writing in a small notebook. The officers were intrigued now, especially when I mentioned that 3 other families on our street had moved out in the past year after constant complaints from Barbara about violations of HOA, rules that seemed to only apply to certain people. The Singh family across the street had gotten citations for their ethnic cooking odors, while Barbara's weekly BBQ smoke drifted into everyone's yards without consequence. I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my laptop. I'd been studying them carefully since Barbara's first warning about my garden gnome being 2 inches too tall. "There's nothing in here about package deliveries or window measurements," I explained to the officers, "but there is something about harassment and discriminatory enforcement of rules." That's when my doorbell camera alert went off again. Barbara was back, this time with her husband Tom in tow, marching up to my porch with a stack of papers. The officers exchanged looks. They hadn't even finished writing up their report about her suspicious package call yet. I couldn't have known then that this wasn't just about a nosy neighbor with too much time on her hands. Those papers Barbara was carrying, they weren't just HOA violation notices. They were about to lead us all down a rabbit hole of corruption that would shake our quiet suburban community to its core. But first, I had to deal with whatever new accusation Barbara had cooked up and why she was so desperate to know what was in that package. The morning it all started, I was just trying to put up a small garden gnome my daughter had painted. Barbara Thompson marched across my lawn in her designer workout clothes, waving a ruler like it was a weapon. "That decoration is exactly 2.3 inches over the height limit," she yelled, her face turning red. I stayed calm, even as she took photos and threatened to call the HOA board. I didn't know then that this gnome incident would open my eyes to what was really happening in our neighborhood. That night, I couldn't sleep, so I started digging through old HOA meeting minutes online. What I found made my blood run cold. Dozens of complaints, all targeting newer homeowners or families who didn't fit Barbara's idea of perfect neighbors. The next week, I watched from my home office as Barbara measured the Rodriguez family's flower pots, but completely ignored her friend Susan's massive lawn statue. I started taking videos, noting times and dates. My neighbor Tom, a retired lawyer, saw me documenting everything and invited me over for coffee. "You're not the first one to notice," he said, pulling out a thick folder of papers. "But you might be the first one brave enough to do something about it." The real shock came when I went to City Hall to look up property records. Barbara had been lying about the HOA's boundaries. She'd been enforcing rules on 3 streets, that weren't even part of our association. The clerk helping me, an older woman named Janet, remembered Barbara. "Oh, that woman," she said, shaking her head. "She tried to get me fired last year when I wouldn't change some documents for her." I started talking to more neighbors. The Patels told me about being fined for their religious holiday decorations. The Johnsons showed me citations for their son's basketball hoop, the same kind Barbara's grandson had in his driveway. Each story made me angrier, but I kept my cool, building my case piece by piece. Then came the day Barbara's husband Bob stopped me while I was walking my dog. "Be careful," he whispered, looking over his shoulder. "Last family that stood up to her somehow lost all their mail for a month." He hurried away before I could ask more, but his words sent chills down my spine. I hired a private investigator, worth every penny of my savings. Within a week, they uncovered something huge. Barbara didn't even own her house outright. She was behind on payments, but somehow living large, buying new cars and taking luxury cruises. Where was all that money coming from? The answer hit me when I was reviewing the HOA financial reports. All those fines she collected, thousands of dollars, were going into an account only she controlled. But I needed proof, solid proof that would stand up to her threats of lawsuits and her powerful friends on the board. I set up a meeting with the local news station's investigative team, sharing copies of everything I'd found. The reporter's eyes got bigger and bigger as she flipped through my documents. "This isn't just about lawn gnomes anymore, is it?" she asked. Little did I know, Barbara was about to give them an even bigger story, one that started with a simple package at my door. I couldn't believe my eyes when I checked my phone's security alert, right there on my screen, while 2 police officers were still standing at my front door, questioning me about the suspicious package. I watched Barbara creeping along the side of my house. She was tiptoeing through my flower beds, crushing the petunias I'd just planted last weekend, pressing her face against my window like some cartoon villain. "Officers," I said calmly, turning my phone around to show them the live feed. "Would you mind taking a look at what's happening on the side of my house?" Right now, their eyes widened as they watched Barbara, the one who'd called them here in the first place, sneaking around my property. The younger officer immediately walked around the corner to confront her. I heard Barbara's shrill voice. "I was just making sure she wasn't doing anything dangerous with that package. Someone has to protect this neighborhood." While they dealt with Barbara, I rushed to my home office. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the bright blue folder I'd labeled HOA incidents. Inside was every single thing I'd been collecting over the past 3 months. Emails, photos, written complaints, everything. I'd started keeping records after Barbara tried to find the Singh family. 500s for cooking curry, claiming their ethnic food smells were lowering property values. I spread the papers across my dining room table just as the officers returned. "I think you both need to see this," I said, pointing to the growing pile of evidence. "This isn't just about me or my package." There were dozens of photos showing Barbara measuring people's grass with a ruler at 6 a.m., screenshots of her aggressive emails, threatening to fine Mrs. Williams, our 75-year-old neighbor, because her medical supply deliveries were unsightly. A video of her yelling at a young couple for painting their door navy blue instead of the HOA approved ocean blue, even though they had written approval from the board. The older officer picked up a document, his forehead wrinkling as he read. It was the property map I'd gotten from the county office, showing that Barbara had actually built her fence 2 feet into the Thompsons' yard, even though she'd tried to fine them for the same thing last month. "Ma'am," the younger officer said, "looking through more papers? How long has this been going on?" I pulled up my spreadsheet showing every incident I'd recorded. Dates, times, witnesses, and Barbara's increasingly bizarre rules that weren't even in the HOA guidelines. The officers exchanged worried glances when they saw the pattern of harassment. Just then, my doorbell camera chimed again. Barbara was back at my front door, her face red with anger, waving what looked like printouts from her own security cameras. "I have proof," she shouted through the door. "I have pictures of every package she's received for months. Just wait until the board sees this." The officers stepped outside to talk to her, and I used that moment to check my email. There, sitting in my inbox, was something that made my heart race. A message from Timothy Chen, our former HOA treasurer, with the subject line, "Re Barbara Thompson, Financial Records." I clicked it open, my hands trembling as I read the first line. "I've been waiting for someone to finally stand up to her. There's something you need to see." A notification popped up on my phone. Barbara was now live streaming on our neighborhood Facebook group, standing in her driveway and telling everyone about the dangerous situation unfolding at my house. But as I watched the comments scroll by, I noticed something strange. Neighbors were starting to share their own stories about Barbara in the comments. Dozens of them. And Timothy's email contained information that would change everything. I glanced out my window to see Barbara pacing in her driveway, phone held high, totally unaware that her perfect little kingdom was about to come crashing down. I just had to decide how to use what Timothy had sent me. My hands were shaking as I opened the email from Timothy Chen. He'd left the HOA board so suddenly last year that rumors spread like wildfire through our neighborhood. Some said he'd been forced out. Others claimed he moved away, but I was staring at an email address that still showed our zip code. I've been watching what Barbara's been doing to you and the others. His message began. It's exactly what happened to me, but this time, I have proof. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the attachments. Spreadsheets, bank statements, and dozens of emails dating back 3 years. As I clicked through each file, my mouth dropped open. Barbara hadn't just been targeting people with petty rules she'd been running. A whole system of favoritism and revenge. The documents showed how she'd waived thousands in fines for her friend Susan's unauthorized pool installation, while hitting the Rodriguez family with daily penalties for their children's basketball hoop. She'd approved her bridge club members' house paint colors without review, but forced Mrs. Chen to repaint her entire house twice, claiming the shade of gray was too ethnic. I noticed a pattern in the financial records. Every time someone challenged Barbara at an HOA meeting, they'd suddenly start getting hit with violation notices. But these weren't just random power trips. She was using the fines to control people. Those who learned their lesson and stopped questioning her would mysteriously have their fines reduced or disappeared entirely. My screen lit up with a new email. Notification from Timothy. Keep scrolling to May 2023. That's when I found it. The smoking gun. Barbara had created a secret community improvement fund that only she controlled. The thousands in fines she'd collected from her targets hadn't gone into the HOA's regular account. Instead, they were being funneled into this separate fund, which showed withdrawals matching deposits into her personal account. Just then, my doorbell rang. Through my security camera, I saw Barbara standing there with her phone pointed at my house. She was probably planning to file another complaint about my porch lights or doormat, but this time, something was different. Instead of feeling angry or scared, I felt calm. I had what I needed. I called Timothy. I have a plan, I told him, but I need to know everything that happened when you were treasurer. He took a deep breath. She started small at first, targeting new homeowners who wouldn't know the rules well enough to fight back. When I noticed the separate account, she claimed it was for emergency landscaping. But then I saw her using that money to pay for her cruise vacation. She said if I reported it, she'd make sure everyone believed I had stolen the money myself. My phone buzzed with texts from other neighbors. Barbara was going door to door, telling people I was running an illegal business from my home because of all my package deliveries. Little did she know, each message they sent me was one more piece of evidence. I spent the next hour scanning Timothy's documents and organizing them alongside my own records. The picture they painted was crystal clear. A 3-year campaign of harassment, discrimination, and financial fraud, all hidden behind the facade of protecting property values. As I finished uploading everything to a secure folder, another email arrived, this time from Barbara herself. The subject line read, "Final warning." I clicked it open, my cursor hovering over the record button on my screen. Her message was exactly what I'd hoped for. A long list of threats about what would happen if I didn't fall in line. She had no idea that she'd just handed me the last piece of evidence I needed. I reached for my phone to call an emergency HOA meeting, but stopped when I saw a new message from Timothy. Before you do anything, there's one more thing you need to see. Check the HOA's original property maps from 2020. Barbara's been hiding something much bigger than missing money. I opened the attachment and suddenly understood why she'd been so desperate to keep people afraid and quiet. There, in the official county records, was a truth that would change everything. Now I just had to decide how to use it. My phone lit up again. Barbara was calling. This time I answered. I took a deep breath before pushing open the heavy wooden doors to our community center. The emergency HOA meeting I'd called was about to begin, and my hands were shaking as I clutched my folder of evidence. Barbara was already there, perched in her usual front row seat like a hawk ready to strike, her perfectly styled hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Just as I began setting up my laptop to present, Barbara jumped up, her voice cutting through the quiet murmurs of the room. "This is ridiculous. We all know this troublemaker is just trying to cause drama. Because she can't follow simple rules." Her words echoed off the walls, but this time I didn't flinch. "Actually, Barbara," I said, my voice steady as I pulled up the first piece of evidence. "This meeting isn't about me at all." The projector hummed to life, displaying a grid of security camera footage. It's about patterns of behavior that have affected everyone in this room. The screen showed Barbara sneaking onto my property during the package incident, but that was just the beginning. Frame after frame revealed her taking photos through windows, measuring people's lawns with a ruler at midnight, and leaving threatening notes on doors. The room grew so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. But wait, I continued, clicking to the next slide. Let's talk about the real reason behind all this harassment. Timothy Chen's financial records filled the screen, showing years of selective enforcement. The gasps were audible when people saw how their neighbors, particularly Barbara's friends, had thousands in fines mysteriously disappear. Barbara's face turned red as she scrambled to her feet. "You have no right to access those records!" she screamed, but Mr. Chen himself stood up from the back row. "Actually, as the former treasurer, I provided those records legally, and I can verify every single number." That's when the floodgates opened. Mrs. Williams, our elderly neighbor who'd lived here for 3 decades, slowly rose from her seat, her voice trembling. "For months, I've been afraid to accept deliveries of my husband's heart medication because Barbara kept reporting them as suspicious packages. We've been driving 40 minutes to pick them up at the pharmacy instead." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she added, "We're selling our home because we can't take the stress anymore." One by one, neighbors started speaking up. The Singh family revealed how Barbara had tried to ban their traditional cooking, claiming unusual odors were against HOA rules. The Johnsons showed photos of her measuring their children's chalk drawings with a ruler, threatening fines for unauthorized sidewalk modifications. Barbara's husband sank lower in his chair with each new story. But she wasn't done fighting. She pulled out her own folder, waving it wildly. "I have documentation of every violation. These people are destroying our property values with their..." She trailed off as our new HOA lawyer, whom I'd invited, stood up. "Mrs. Thompson," he said calmly, "I've reviewed your documentation. Targeting specific homeowners with discriminatory enforcement isn't just against HOA bylaws, it's illegal. And the financial discrepancies Mr. Chen uncovered? Those warrant a full investigation." The color drained from Barbara's face as she realized her power was slipping away. She turned to her usual supporters, but they avoided her gaze. Even her closest ally, Susan from the garden committee, was staring at her phone, pretending not to notice. I pulled up one final slide, a simple bar graph showing how property values had actually dropped under Barbara's leadership, while similar nearby communities had thrived. "We have a choice," I said, looking around the room. "We can continue down this path of harassment and selective enforcement, or we can build the kind of community that attracts families instead of driving them away." Barbara grabbed her designer purse and stormed toward the exit, shouting about lawsuits and property rights. But before she could leave, her husband stood up. "I'd like to make a motion," he said quietly. "I move that we vote on removing the current HOA president and launch a full audit of our finances." The motion passed unanimously. As people began filing out, many stopped to share more stories or simply say thank you. I noticed the Singh family talking with Barbara's husband, who was genuinely apologizing for his wife's behavior. Mrs. Williams hugged me, whispering that they might not sell their house after all. Looking around at my neighbors, really seeing them as people, instead of just houses on a map, I realized that standing up to a bully had done more than solve my own problems. But as I packed up my laptop, a new email notification popped up from an anonymous address. "You have no idea what you've started. This isn't over." The emergency HOA meeting started with a bang as Barbara burst through the doors. Waving a stack of papers she claimed would prove her innocence. But I was ready. The moment she started speaking, I pulled up the security footage on the projector screen, dozens of clips showing her trespassing on different properties, taking photos through windows, and harassing delivery drivers. The room fell completely silent as the evidence unfolded. Barbara's face turned pale when I shared Timothy's financial records, showing how she'd waived over $50,000 in fines for her friends while charging others triple for minor violations. Her hands started shaking when Mrs. Williams, our elderly neighbor, slowly stood up with her oxygen tank and described how Barbara had filed complaints about the unsightly medical equipment on her porch, forcing her to delay crucial oxygen deliveries. Then came the biggest shock. Mr. Thompson, Barbara's own husband, walked to the front of the room. "I can't stay quiet anymore," he said, his voice trembling. He revealed how Barbara had been running a side business, charging certain residents consulting fees to avoid violations. The room erupted in angry whispers as people started checking their bank statements. The Singh family shared screenshots of Barbara's racist comments about their ethnic cooking smells in private HOA messages. The young couple from Unit 12 showed photos of Barbara measuring their grass with a ruler at 6 a.m., Each story was another piece of the puzzle, revealing years of harassment and abuse of power. Barbara tried interrupting, screaming about her rights as HOA president, but her words were drowned out by the evidence. When the police officers I had invited showed up with the documentation of all her false reports, including the suspicious package incident, she finally fell silent. The vote to remove her was unanimous. Even her closest friends couldn't defend her actions anymore. As she stormed out threatening lawsuits, I noticed something that made me smile. Neighbors who had never spoken before were exchanging phone numbers, planning community events, and talking about making real changes. A week later, we elected a diverse new board including Mrs. Williams, Mr. Singh, and surprisingly, Mr. Thompson, who was determined to make things right. We created a transparent online system for violation reports and required body camera footage for all property inspections. The suspicious package that started it all? It was a community organizing handbook my son had ordered for his social studies project. He got an A+ for his presentation on how one person can make a difference. But the real victory wasn't just removing Barbara. It was watching our neighborhood transform. The Williams family hosted a medical awareness fundraiser on their front lawn, complete with those unsightly oxygen tanks displayed proudly. The Singhs started a monthly cultural food festival that even Barbara's former supporters now attend. That young couple with the too tall grass created a community garden program. Looking back, I realized that sometimes it takes one small incident, like a suspicious package report, to expose bigger problems. As I watched kids from all different backgrounds playing together at our first community picnic, I couldn't help but think about how fear and control can poison a community, but standing up to bullies can heal it. Just yesterday, I saw Barbara house hunting in another neighborhood. When she spotted me, she quickly looked away. But I noticed something interesting. She was carrying a copy of the same community organizing handbook that had started this whole journey. Maybe, just maybe, she learned something too. 6 months after Barbara's removal, I was sorting through my mail when I found a thick envelope from the county courthouse. Inside was a notice that would make my jaw drop. Barbara was being investigated for similar schemes in 3 other neighborhoods. I quickly called Timothy, who revealed he'd been working with a task force investigating HOA fraud across the state. My hands shook as I read through the documents showing how Barbara had been part of a network of HOA officers who moved from community to community, taking control and extracting money through fake fines and inflated maintenance contracts. That same afternoon, I noticed moving trucks at Barbara's house. Her husband Tom was supervising the loading while looking nervously over his shoulder. When he saw me, he walked over with slumped shoulders and told me something that sent chills down my spine. Barbara had been doing this for 15 years, destroying communities while building a secret fortune. She'd convinced him it was all legal until he found documents hidden in their attic, showing connections to fake maintenance companies. Just then, my phone buzzed with messages from neighbors. Barbara had been spotted at the airport trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. The police were already there, and the scene that unfolded was something none of us could have imagined. As they led her away in handcuffs, she was still yelling about property values and unauthorized lawn ornaments. I watched the local news coverage that evening with Mrs. Williams and the Singhs, who had become close friends through this ordeal. The reporter revealed that Barbara's network had stolen over $2 million from unsuspecting homeowners across the state. The investigation had exposed a pattern of targeting diverse and elderly residents with fake violations to force them out, then flipping their properties for profit. Our neighborhood started healing. The new HOA board, led by Mrs. Williams' daughter Sarah, created a community garden in the empty lot where Barbara had once banned children from playing. The Singhs opened their home for monthly potluck dinners, filling the air with those amazing cooking smells that Barbara had tried to stop. Even Tom started attending, slowly making amends by volunteering at our community events. 1 year to the day after that suspicious package delivery, we held a block party to celebrate our community's transformation. As I watched kids playing freely in front yards that once had to meet Barbara's strict standards, Timothy pulled me aside. He handed me a letter from the FBI. They wanted to interview me about similar HOA schemes in other states. Who knew that standing up to one neighborhood bully would help expose a nationwide scam? But that's a story for another day. The information in this video is for informational and entertainment purposes only. HOA rules and laws vary by state and community.